In August 1944, the finest military minds in Germany made a calculation that seemed irrefutable. General Patton's Third Army had advanced 400 miles in 30 days, outrunning every logistics textbook ever written. The mathematics were simple. An armored division consumes 150,000 gallons of fuel daily when advancing. The Americans were now 400 miles from their supply depots. German generals waited for the inevitable. Patton would halt within days, perhaps hours. No army in history had ever sustained such advance speeds. Physical laws cannot be violated, not even by American industry. What the Germans didn't know was that 125 miles away, 6,000 trucks were already rolling eastward in an endless convoy, headlights blazing in defiance of every military doctrine, carrying 12,500 tons of supplies every 24 hours. The Red Ball Express was about to shatter every assumption about mechanized warfare. Within 72 hours, Patton's supposedly immobilized tanks would crash through German positions. Within a week, they would liberate Paris. Within a month, they would stand at the German border. This is the story of how 23,000 truck drivers defeated the German army at 35 miles per hour. 75% of them were African-American soldiers serving in a segregated army, men who couldn't eat in white restaurants or use white facilities in much of their own country, but who kept the most celebrated generals in American history rolling toward victory. They drove through exhaustion, through mechanical failure, through weather that stopped armor. They proved Hitler's racial theories wrong with every mile driven, every ton delivered. The German generals laughed at American logistics. They called it wasteful, undisciplined, impossible to sustain. 82 days later, those same generals surrendered to armies supplied by men they had dismissed as racially inferior. Finally understanding that American trucks had defeated German tanks, that industrial abundance had overwhelmed military excellence, and that in modern warfare, the convoy of trucks matters more than the column of tanks. The Wehrmacht had pioneered blitzkrieg, revolutionized combined arms warfare, and understood intimately what they called the tyranny of supply lines. Their own campaigns had repeatedly stalled when logistics failed to keep pace with tactical success. In Russia, the German advance had foundered not from Soviet resistance initially, but from the simple inability to supply forces across vast distances. German trucks broke down on Russian roads. Horse-drawn wagons, still 80% of German military transport, couldn't match the speed of Panzer spearheads. German intelligence meticulously tracked American consumption rates in the summer of 1944. A single Sherman tank burned half a mile per gallon on roads, far worse cross-country. An infantry division required 700 tons of supplies daily. An armored division needed 1,000 tons. Patton commanded 12 divisions advancing on a 60-mile front. The mathematics seemed irrefutable. 12,000 tons daily, transported 400 miles from the beaches, over damaged roads, through a transportation network the Germans had systematically destroyed during their retreat. General Major Siegfried Westphal calculated on August 20th that even if the Americans possessed unlimited trucks, which they didn't, and perfect roads, which they didn't, and no mechanical failures, which was impossible, they still couldn't sustain Patton's advance more than another 48 hours. Physical laws cannot be violated, he wrote, not even by American industry. On August 25th, in a requisitioned French chateau near Le Mans, Lieutenant Colonel Laurent Ayres of the Motor Transport Service faced a room full of skeptical officers. Traditional supply methods had collapsed under the strain of Patton's advance. Railways were destroyed. Scheduled convoys couldn't keep pace. The situation was desperate. "Gentlemen," Ayres announced, "We're going to create a one-way highway from Cherbourg and the beaches to the front lines. Every vehicle will run 20 hours out of 24. No stopping except for gas and emergencies. We'll move 12,500 tons daily minimum." The name came from railway terminology. A red ball freight was an express shipment that took priority over everything else. The Red Ball Express would operate on the same principle: absolute priority, no delays, no exceptions. The technical specifications defied German military doctrine. 2 parallel one-way highways, one for loaded trucks going forward, one for empties returning. 24-hour operations with headlights blazing, abandoning blackout discipline. 5-minute convoy intervals maintaining 35-mile-per-hour average speed. Mobile maintenance units every 50 miles. Military police checkpoints removing any vehicle below 25 miles per hour. Within 36 hours, the impossible was operational. On August 26th, drivers from the 3916th Quartermaster Truck Company climbed into their GMC 2.5-ton trucks, nicknamed the Deuce and a Half, loaded with artillery shells bound for Patton's guns 300 miles east. The greatest logistics operation in military history had begun. The demographic composition of the Red Ball Express would have stunned German racial theorists. Of the 23,000 drivers who would eventually operate the route, approximately 75% were African-American soldiers serving in a still segregated army. These men had enlisted to fight for a country that denied them equal rights. They had trained at bases where they couldn't use white facilities. They had shipped overseas, knowing that German prisoners of war sometimes received better treatment in American camps than they did. Yet they drove. They drove because they understood something the racists at home and the Nazis abroad would never comprehend, that proving themselves in war was the path to proving themselves in peace. Every mile they covered was an argument against segregation. Every ton they delivered was evidence that skin color had nothing to do with capability. They were fighting 2 wars simultaneously, against Hitler abroad and against prejudice at home, and they intended to win both. The drivers developed their own culture within hours. They painted slogans on their trucks: Patton's Blood Bank, Hitler, Here We Come, Detroit to Berlin Express. They created their own traffic rules. Slower vehicles pulled off immediately. Mechanical failures were pushed into ditches. Any truck below 20 miles per hour was considered a roadblock. They drove through exhaustion that would have hospitalized civilians, through mechanical failures that would have stranded commercial operations, through conditions that German logistics officers declared impossible. By August 28th, German reconnaissance units began reporting something unprecedented. Units from Aufklärungs Abteilung 116 radioed from positions overlooking the main Red Ball route. Continuous vehicle column, headlights visible for 20 kilometers, no spacing, no blackout discipline. Estimate 1,000 vehicles per hour. Americans have abandoned all military precaution. This violated everything German military doctrine taught. Headlights at night invited air attack. Continuous columns presented perfect artillery targets, yet the Americans seemed unconcerned. General Lieutenant Edgar Feuchtinger, commanding the 21st Panzer Division, personally observed the Red Ball Express from concealed positions on August 30th. His report to Army Group B headquarters reflected growing alarm. "The enemy operates a supply system beyond our comprehension. Vehicles pass at 30-second intervals, day and night, without pause. They don't hide, don't disperse, don't follow any rules we understand. It's not military science, it's mass production applied to warfare." What the Germans couldn't understand was that American logistics operated on different principles entirely. Where German doctrine emphasized concealment, Americans relied on volume. Where Germans conserved vehicles, Americans assumed 20% mechanical failure and planned accordingly. Where Germans followed strict military procedure, Americans improvised continuously. The Red Ball Express achieved what German calculations declared impossible because it refused to accept German definitions of what was possible. The numbers achieved by the Red Ball Express defied German calculations of what was logistically possible. In the first week, from August 25th to 31st, the operation delivered 89,939 tons of supplies. Daily average, 12,848 tons. Round-trip distance, 686 miles. Vehicle rotations, nearly 6,000 trucks making 1.5 trips daily. Fuel consumed by the operation itself, 300,000 gallons. German logistics specialists captured these numbers from American documents and dismissed them as propaganda. But the numbers were real, and they were accelerating. By September 5th, the Red Ball Express had established a rhythm that seemed impossible to German logistics officers who still relied on horse-drawn wagons for 80% of their transport. Convoys departed every 5 minutes from the western terminus. Average convoy, 67 vehicles. Load per vehicle, 5 tons standard, 7 tons with frequent overload. Time to cover 350 miles one way, 14 hours average. Turnaround time at each end, 2 hours. Vehicles in constant motion at any given moment, 5,000. The Red Ball Express generated innovations hourly as drivers and mechanics solved problems German military science considered insurmountable. When trucks broke down, approximately 1,800 daily, mobile maintenance units performed repairs on the roadside. Mechanics developed a triage system, 15 minutes to fix or push it off the road. Parts were cannibalized from vehicles deemed unrepairable. Engines were swapped in 45 minutes using mobile cranes. The most stunning revelation for German observers was American fuel management. The Red Ball Express consumed 300,000 gallons of gasoline daily just for its own operations, more than many German armies received for all purposes. Yet fuel never ran short. The Americans had created a parallel marvel, pipelines under the ocean laying fuel lines across the English Channel. By September, fuel flowed through underwater pipes German intelligence hadn't even detected. Forward fuel dumps were established every 25 miles along the Red Ball route. Tanker trucks ran their own parallel convoy system, ensuring no vehicle waited more than 10 minutes for refueling. General Major Walter Warlimont observed from aerial reconnaissance photographs, "The Americans have fuel dumps larger than our entire strategic reserves. They burn more gasoline moving gasoline than we allocate to entire panzer divisions. This isn't war as we understand it, it's industrial overflow." The Germans were watching something they had never imagined, a nation so wealthy in resources that it could afford to be wasteful, and so confident in its production that waste didn't matter. The Red Ball Express drivers paid a physical price German observers couldn't see. Drivers operated for 72 straight hours, hallucinating from exhaustion and benzodrine. Accidents killed 300 drivers during the operation's 82 days. Trucks collided in fog, overturned on damaged roads, burned when overheated engines ignited fuel loads. Yet morale remained extraordinarily high. These men understood they were making history. They were proving Hitler's racial theories wrong with every mile driven, every ton delivered. Among the 23,000 Red Ball drivers, individual stories of heroism emerged that Germans found incomprehensible within their military framework. Corporal John L. Houston drove continuously for 48 hours, delivering ammunition to the 2nd Armored Division, falling asleep at the wheel 3 times, but continuing after being revived by other drivers. Private Booker T. Washington's truck caught fire from overheated brakes while carrying medical supplies. Instead of abandoning it, as procedure required, he drove the burning vehicle 2 miles to a field hospital, jumping out as flames reached the cab. The supplies saved wounded soldiers from both armies. The vehicles themselves amazed German engineers. The GMC CCKW 2.5-ton truck, the backbone of the Red Ball Express, represented mass production perfection. General Motors produced over 500,000 of these vehicles by war's end, more trucks than the entire German military possessed of all types combined. The trucks featured innovations Germans hadn't implemented: all-wheel drive as standard, automatic tire inflation systems, waterproofing that allowed 30-inch fording, engines that ran on low-quality fuel without modification. More stunning was American maintenance philosophy. Where Germans rebuilt engines, Americans replaced them. Where Germans rationed parts, Americans discarded entire vehicles for minor problems. Where Germans had master mechanics, Americans had thousands of competent mechanics who could perform 80% of repairs. The operation consumed vehicles at rates that would have paralyzed any other military. Average vehicle life, 10,000 miles versus a normal 30,000. Daily deadline rate, 30% of all vehicles. Engines replaced, 500 weekly. Tires consumed, 10,000 weekly. Total vehicles destroyed or abandoned, over 5,000. Yet the operation never slowed. American production had anticipated such losses. Ships arrived weekly at French ports carrying hundreds of new trucks. Replacement drivers were trained in 2 days and thrown into convoys. German calculations showed Americans destroying more trucks weekly than the Wehrmacht possessed in France. Yet American transport capacity increased rather than decreased. They had achieved something Germans thought impossible: logistics faster than consumption. The predominance of African American drivers in the Red Ball Express created cognitive dissonance for German racial theorists. Nazi ideology declared blacks inferior, incapable of technical tasks, lacking initiative. Yet these drivers were performing logistics miracles that German forces couldn't match. The African American soldiers understood the irony. They knew what the Nazis thought of them, which made them drive even harder. Every mile they drove proved Hitler wrong. They were fighting racism with truck keys, defeating Nazi ideology through superior performance. Some German prisoners, forced to load Red Ball trucks as laborers, found their worldview shattered by working alongside African American sergeants who calculated weight distributions faster than German engineers, who spoke better English than German instructors, who treated prisoners fairly despite everything Nazi propaganda had told them about racial behavior. SS racial science publications simply stopped mentioning American logistics operations. The evidence was too overwhelming to deny, too damaging to acknowledge. The Red Ball Express forced an unexpected racial reckoning within the American military itself. The operation's success depended overwhelmingly on African American soldiers who were still segregated, denied equal treatment, and barred from combat roles. General Eisenhower visited Red Ball operations in September 1944 and witnessed the contradiction firsthand. His aide recorded that the general stood watching colored drivers who'd been at it for 20 hours straight. He said, "These men are winning the war as surely as any infantry. We need to reconsider many things." The success created pressure for integration that contributed to military desegregation 3 years later. African American soldiers had proved in France what they always knew. Given the tools and opportunity, they would match anyone. The red ball was their combat, and they won it decisively. General George S. Patton, whose Third Army was the primary beneficiary of the Red Ball Express, wrote the ultimate tribute. The truck drivers of the Red Ball Express deserved as much credit for the defeat of Germany as any combat unit. They drove through exhaustion, through mechanical failure, through weather that stopped armor. Without them, the Third Army doesn't move. Without movement, we don't win. They were black soldiers mostly, segregated, discriminated against, denied recognition. But they won the war as surely as any rifleman. History must record this truth. The Red Ball Express operated for 82 days, from August 25th to November 16th, 1944. The final statistics stand as testament to American industrial warfare. 412,193 tons of supplies delivered, 122 million ton-miles, nearly 6,000 vehicles operating daily, 23,000 total drivers employed, 57 million gallons of fuel consumed, 47 German divisions defeated through supply advantage, an estimated 180 days of war shortened. When German generals surrendered in May 1945, many cited the Red Ball Express specifically as demonstrating the hopelessness of continued resistance. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, among Germany's most competent commanders, was asked what most surprised him about American forces. His answer: not your tanks, not your planes, but your trucks. The Red Ball Express showed us that you had militarized your entire society's production capacity. We were fighting your factories, not just your soldiers. In 1994, on the 50th anniversary of D-Day, the United States Postal Service issued a commemorative stamp honoring the Red Ball Express. Veterans who attended the ceremony spoke of their pride in an operation that had been overshadowed by combat operations, but proved equally decisive in Allied victory. They had driven through exhaustion, through mechanical failure, through weather that stopped armor. They were black soldiers mostly, segregated, discriminated against, denied recognition during the war, but they had delivered victory at 35 miles per hour. The last word belongs to a German officer quoted by a Red Ball driver at the 1994 commemoration. Standing beside a road in Belgium in 1944, watching the endless convoy of American trucks, the officer said in accented English to his captors, "We prepared for everything. Your tanks, your planes, your ships. We never prepared for your trucks." How do you defeat an enemy who has more trucks than you have soldiers? The answer rolled past him at 5-minute intervals, driven by exhausted Americans who were rewriting the rules of warfare one delivery at a time. The German generals who laughed at American logistics in August 1944 signed surrender documents in May 1945, defeated by 23,000 truck drivers who revolutionized warfare at 35 miles per hour. Their story deserves its place among the great military operations of history, not because it was elegant or efficient, but because it worked. The Red Ball Express kept Patton rolling, kept the Germans retreating, and proved that in modern war, amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics, and Americans talk trucks. The Red Ball Express was America talking very loudly indeed.